record hurricane to make landfall.
The search for victims
A
continues.
bridge collapsed after a cargo ship struck.
Wildfires continue to spread throughout Los Angeles.
Rescue efforts are underway.
Residents evacuated in
A
hazardous...
plane burst into
The tornado
flames
watch
after-
is in effect.
When called to serve, split-second decisions have the power to add years to a life. Imagine if data could help drive the right decisions for better outcomes every time.
Emergency detected.
Imagine systems that can predict needs, scan environmental data, understand community risk, and access patient histories. With predictive tools,
MVC detected.
firefighters are able to send the right resource right where it's needed.
Help is on the way. Connecting with dispatcher now.
Real-time information into what's happening on scene, even before paramedics arrive.
Patient has open tibial fracture.
Data moves with the patient, and information is handed off in real time, closing gaps in care. Location no longer limits our reach. Doctors and nurses have instant access to historical trends that provide context, while decision support leads the way. New pathways surface so experts can meet people where they are, turning living rooms into care rooms. Data and technology are always working behind the scenes so that each response helps to improve the next. It anticipates, learns, and refines. This is the future. Better outcomes start with the power of data.
Morning. I trust you all had a good evening. Some of your friends may still be recovering. The good news is we're recording the session for them, so we'll let them catch up. I appreciate you all joining us this morning for what I hope will be a very interesting conversation. As many of you know, ESO began in a coffee shop, and from humble beginnings now for 21 years, we've been on a journey. We appreciate you trusting us, partnering with us, and our mission now for over 2 decades remains unchanged. To improve community health and safety, we've focused on applications, interoperability, and data. And that continues to be our focus. In fact, it's what's brought us to today. But let's rewind. Where did those focus areas come from? Let's revisit where we began this journey together. Nearly 6 decades ago, these seminal documents helped to vision a future for all of us. Today, I remain in awe of the commonality and the intersection between the trauma, EMS, and fire service professions. These documents were very visionary in their day. In 1966, accidental death and disability, the neglected disease of modern society, at a time in which there was an epidemic of motor vehicle collisions and other injuries, really led the way. It provided a tremendous blueprint for the recommendations that ultimately have informed our system. Prevention, system design, professional, organizational, and advocacy arms, and a national standardized data set. We've made a tremendous amount of progress, yet we can do more. The Emergency Medical Systems and Services and Systems Act of 1973 blueprinted the modern EMS system that continues today. Similarly, it helped to identify a need for a national data set, It established a national 3-digit emergency telephone number, charged us to develop a scientific literature base to help guide training and performance improvement. It also placed EMS under the Department of Transportation, back to that epidemic of motor vehicle collisions. We've made a tremendous amount of accomplishment as well here, but we have a long road ahead. Together, accidental death and disability and the EMS Systems Act have yielded dramatic improvement in outcomes, particularly around mortality associated with motor vehicle collisions. Not to be outdone, 1973 was also the year the Commission on Fire Prevention and Control published this 200-page seminal document, America Burning. It provided a baseline set of data on morbidity and mortality and property loss, specific recommendations to help inform public health and firefighter safety. It called on a collective effort to support research, particularly around response, fire science, and firefighter safety. While we've delivered much on this vision, we still have a significant opportunity ahead. We've made considerable progress, but in 2025, America is still burning. And in fact, the United States continues to have some of the highest per capita death rates and property loss of all major industrialized nations. As many of you know, I'm not a technologist by pedigree. I started my career in the industry as a firefighter, as a paramedic, an emergency and EMS physician, and I'm now a recovering hospital administrator. When I came to ESO full-time a couple of years ago, I found myself at an inflection point. I became acutely aware of where we stand as a company, but also personally. I became very interested in understanding where we were as an industry with our data, the advances in technology that could put that data to work for good, and I began gathering inspiration. I started by looking to our customers. Many of our most innovative customers are here today. We have others that are some of the most innovative organizations in the world who use our software. Lessons to be learned from out of industry as well. ESO has sought out and partnered with true thought leaders. True experts are helping to inform our strategy in the field. I also went back to a book that I read about a decade ago. For those of you who perhaps don't know this book by this cover, it's a seminal work from 1962 that provides some very tried and true framework around thinking about innovation and how innovation, broadly defined as an idea, a practice, or a technology, gets adopted in an industry. It's been adapted for public safety, for healthcare, for technology, and I think it's really relevant to our discussion, so I'll remind you just briefly. It looked at any particular adoption curve, and it thinks about it at the adopter level. That's people, teams, and organizations. It separated it into 5 categorical cohorts that were predictably seen in study. What they found is that the innovators, on the far left, about 2.5% of the population, tend to be the fastest adopting group. For those that are kind of statistical nerds, this is -2 standard deviations from the mean. This group tends to be venturesome. They have a tolerance for risk. They transcend geographic boundaries. They typically engage in remote connections, and they also typically have the resources and the capacity to be able to do that. Early adopters are quicker to adopt than the average. This group represents approximately 13%. They're opinion leaders. They're well-connected socially in their communities. They look to speak with the innovators to identify those emerging trends and practices. And somewhere around 15 to 18% is the infamous tipping point in which things tend to really take hold. Getting to that point, often referred to as the chasm, is really at that 15 to 18% mark. The early majority are individuals who look to the early adopters for influence. They're inherently local in their perspective. They tend to be more risk averse. This group, again, represents about 34%. The late majority, this group, another 34%, is even more conservative. They look to the early majority for signal. They want to make sure that they're trying things in a safe way when it appears to be a new status quo. And then finally, there's the laggards. The laggards are the last 16%, -1 standard deviation from the mean. This probably misstates this group because there actually is an inherent value and wisdom in this segment. This is the group that might be better named traditionalists, sea anchors, archivists, historians. Under any label, this group holds out to the bitter end, often waiting to be forced through obsolescence to move on from their former approach or system. While that describes the framework and categorization of adopters, the other piece that's really interesting are 5 perceptions that tend to influence why certain innovations spread faster than others. And I think this is particularly relevant for each of you as you think about how innovation is being driven inside your organization, how you as an individual or as a leader think about innovation. The first is advantage. What is the perceived benefit or gain from a particular new practice, technology, or idea? Obviously, the greater the benefit, the more perceived value. Compatibility. Is it compatible with your values, with your ethics, with your experiences, your past practice? Complexity. The more complex, the slower things are adopted. Simple wins. Trialability, to the extent that it's easy to try something, to experiment with it safely and decide if it's actually going to be something that you can incorporate into your practice. And then finally, observability. If you can actually observe the intended benefit gain through those experiments or by watching others, it's more likely to be adopted. I challenge you all to think about where you are on that diffusion of innovation curve. And where is your organization? And where is our industry? I'd like to invite my panel to come join me on the stage. We're going to begin to have a conversation to explore these issues a little bit more fully by taking a cross-functional, cross-industry approach to the conversation. We'll go ahead and maybe start with some introductions. Full bio should be in the app if you're interested, but why don't we go ahead and start with you, Ian. Maybe tell us who you are, where you're from, a little bit about your organization and your work, and maybe a fun fact.
Okay. Yeah, my name's Ian Womack. Currently I work for the city of St. Petersburg, and I'm privileged to serve as the fire marshal there. I spent the 10 years before that as the EMS chief, and we are a public utility model, so we're one of the largest EMS systems in the country, and we were the largest provider in that system. Before that, I started in the fire service in 1998, but I'm the son of a contractor, so I grew up in the building space, in that world. Never planned to be a firefighter. I was supposed to be an architect. And then some friends invited me to come and join the volunteer fire department, which I just had to fill out an application. They gave me a pager, set of gear, slapped me on the bottom, and sent me on my way. And the first time I got in a fire truck, I fell in love. I was like, man, people get paid to do this? This is ridiculous. The whole plan changed, right? I ended up in the fire academy and ended up in the fire service, and have been extraordinarily surprised by how many opportunities and branches that such a simple start or vocational career can lead to. So I've been privileged in the years too to work in the consulting side of things and some of the accreditation side. I've worked for a consulting firm for about 10 years now. So I've had the benefit too of being able to go into other organizations and really deep dive under the hood, look at their data, look at their processes, look at their management. And there's so much to glean out of there because we're all situated facing the same environment and challenges, and we're all made up of people and human beings. So I've benefited tremendously from that. That's kind of my holistic background. A fun fact. I was joking when he told me he'd asked me for a fun fact. I said, the fun fact is that I'm sitting on a panel with these people. That's funny, actually. I don't know what the fire guy's doing up here. I can roll a hose and throw a ladder, but a lot of brilliant minds. I think a fun fact, we were talking about dancing. I actually fell in love with my wife during ballroom dancing lessons. I know. When you see me, you don't think ballroom, right?
Surprises.
Less Fred Astaire, more country bear jamboree, but That's a little fun fact. The moves are gone at this point, so I can't fancy you do a tango later, so don't ask.
Thanks, Ian. Jeremiah?
Hi, good morning. Great to be with you all. Thanks for all that you do. It's really an honor to be with you and speak today. Jeremiah Nelson, I lead what we call response reporting and evidence at Motorola Solutions. I'm just about to hit 18 years there. I lead the product and engineering teams that build a lot of the technology that powers the 911 systems across the US and beyond. About 60% of the response, 911 response goes through a piece of our software. So 911 call handling, computer-aided dispatch, law records management, body cameras, vehicle cameras, evidence software, situational awareness software, that's all made out of my group. So Motorola Solutions, leader in public safety in those areas. Most of you might know us from the radio side of the house, certainly on the hips of many belts. Not the cell phone company. That's been a part. We jettisoned that part in 2011. So just public safety. Fun fact: I have an alarm clock with no snooze button. I didn't know I was getting an alarm clock with no snooze button. It's a 5-pound little Maltese puppy, and she has decided that the wake-up time is 6 o'clock in my house every day, and she lets me know by jumping on my face and licking it. So she's an absolute joy, but unanticipated consequence of the puppy purchase. So that's my fun fact for the day.
Bharat?
Good morning. I'm Bharat Sitaria. I'm the SVP and Chief Health Officer at Oracle Health, previously Cerner. I spent first decade or so in Detroit at the Detroit Receiving Hospital as the ER and trauma physician, and then migrated to Kansas City. So I've been there for about 20 years with, I would say, relentless focus on how we leverage technology to leave healthcare system better for the next generation. And it's been 25 years in making, and this is the era that excites me the most, and I'm sure we'll talk about that. So fun fact, I don't know if it's a unique fact or fun fact. Can I see a sort of raise of the hand if you have in 1 year visited more than, let's just say, 25 ERs? Anybody visited? I know you guys all visit ERs all the time. So anybody been to uniquely 25 different ER in a year? No one. I've been to 90 ER in one single year. Right? As part of my job when I started, my goal was to go visit every customer I had. So between March of 2004 and December of 2004, I visited 90 emergency departments.
Wow. Thanks. John?
Good morning. Recently joined as CPTO, so Chief Product and Technology Officer for ESO. That's a real thing. You can combine the two of those. I spent about I was thinking about this morning, it's 3 decades in the Valley, 25 years of which have been spent leading product and engineering teams, 5 industries. So had a chance to join ESO by way of Google, where I was responsible for building the health ecosystem, ramping it from 0 to about 600 partners, and then getting to change some outcomes in the lives of 2.9 billion Android users. Before that, I did what I'll call stint in energy, so about 6 years, where I was CTO over at Shell New Energies, building their energy platform, all the things IoT, energy trading, as well as over at GE Power. Before that, I had a chance to join and work with one of the founders at Workday. So again, a dip into enterprise software and really looking at how do you transform a pretty large organization that had some high aspirational goals. How do we become a little more effective, a little more efficient from an engineering and product standpoint? And I think I was really primed for that role in my opportunity at Amazon. So I was up in Seattle for a bit, and I had the opportunity to be the first chief of staff for engineering and product over there, where I led e-commerce planning for Platform and a few other businesses for about 3 years. I'm thinking through it as I'm talking live, Eric. I don't want to go around the rest of my career because I'm realizing now that it's a little bit longer than I thought it was. But again, I've been in fintech at PayPal and a few other places as well. What got me into this, maybe it's part of my fun fact, but was actually as a kid growing up in the early 80s were video games. So whoever remembers the Ataris and ColecoVisions of the world and whatnot that came out, I thought it would be super cool if I could learn to actually sit down and code some of this out. So started programming when I was 7. I've been in tech ever since. And I think my one other fun fact, which I realized when someone threw me something yesterday, is I love watching baseball. In high school, I actually had 1,000 batting average for PE, so nothing impressive. We do what we can, right? But at the end of the day, I also, as I'm left-handed when I write, or a left-handed person in general, but I catch and I throw with my right. So it's never going to work out as a baseball player.
Interesting. We're excited you're here. Lisa?
Good morning, everybody. Lisa Meyer. I'm newer than you are to the ESO family. This is week 2 for me. My background is I've been a nurse, also kind of fell into the technology platform by accident. In the early 2000s, I was working in the ER, and we were having this little project to implement Epic. And you were guaranteed to get your job back if you just did this project for 2 years. I didn't even know how to turn on a laptop. Once you get into IT, you just kind of never leave. It got me into consulting, ended up getting recruited out to Stanford in Palo Alto. And out there I led their inpatient application team. Talk about innovation, Silicon Valley, really. We had people knocking at the door for every startup. Moved back to Minnesota in 2016 for grandkids. Went back into the hospital operations side because I felt like I was a little bit too far away from really what was happening at the bedside. And for me, I've always been passionate that the technology has to work for the people that are using it, and you can't just push it out to them. You really need to get their input on how they're going to use it. And so the last 6 years, I've spent time working with hospitals across the nation on capacity, patient flow, being sure that people are discharged effectively so that as you're bringing those patients in the emergency room, you don't end up with 30 boarders. And, I just met with a hospital out east a few months ago, and their offboarding time was 65 minutes. So those are the kind of things that I'm passionate about. So I'm super excited for this next adventure. My fun fact is I'm not competitive except when it comes to fishing. I want to catch the first fish, the biggest fish. Doesn't matter if it's on the water or on the ice. Anybody that's been in Minnesota, that's what we do in the winter. We sit on the ice and try to catch fish. So.
Well, I appreciate you all being here. Let's dig into our first topic. And this is really about how work is going to change, how we think about what that future looks like, and what does that mean for the human beings and for the teams of people that have to participate in that change, to be part of the adoption of the future, whatever that might look like. Who wants to start?
Yeah, I can kick us off. I think there's 3 pieces to what I think the future is going to hold with regards to some of the technology that's here now that obviously wasn't a few years ago. But I think some of the undercurrents are the same and around change and our adoption of change. Change is difficult, right? People have different appetites for how change happens. A big kind of rallying cry moment that I've typically found around change in the organizations that I've been part of has been the why, right? Once people come on board with the why the change is happening, what the impact is to them, and for us especially, we make a difference in the lives of everyone that we touch. 100% the reason why I joined ESO. I can't think of a better place to be from an outcomes perspective. And for me, it was actually a change coming on board, but also thinking through some of the change that we're looking at rolling out across our suite of products and technology. Been working the first couple months to establish some of the why. So I think one is the why. Second is understanding that folks have different levels of appetite for change. And then the third, I've been maniacal about it, right? I had a chance to, again, lead some planning at some places. And with that, how are you methodical, right? Just like a physician or anyone else would be very methodical around patient triage, all these other elements. Same thing with organizational change. So the technology that's coming down the pike, I view it as it's another tool in the toolbox. How do we best leverage that for our organizations and our customers? But ironing out the why, understanding, kind of winning the hearts and minds of the folks that are actually going to go do that work, and then implementing that as another tool in our toolbox is one of the things that I've seen that really helps encourage and drive change across an org.
I think, Eric, irrespective of the role we play in the entire healthcare ecosystem, whether you are on the front end of the EMS and fire, or on the receiving end in the emergency department, or on the treating end, in the hospital, or even post-acute, throughout the entire continuum of care, I think we are embarking in what I would call a hyper-dynamic era, that technology, for the first time in at least my 2.5 decades, 3 decades, both practicing medicine and playing with technology, I see an alignment coming together. We now have the foundation established. We've digitized healthcare. We've not automated, but digitized healthcare. We've taken paper and converted electronically. So we have the foundation, the raw ingredient, the data part of it. Then what we had difficulty was agile application and intelligence to run on top of that. Look what has happened in the last 2-3 years. Now we've got cloud computing advancing at such a rapid rate. We've got AI advancing at such a rapid rate. So on the technology front, we've got all the right ingredients that are coming together in place. So then the second part of it is the human nature, the people side of it. Consumers in the past were not digitized. Now, actually, the consumers are more digitized than any of us who provide care to them. Their expectations are higher than what we can provide to them. So that part is coming together, right? And then the third part is, technology has 2 parts. You got the software and data and application, but then you got to have a connectivity. And in particularly with the world we all deal with, connectivity is quite important. That problem is getting solved. So for the first time, I actually see all of these ingredients coming together, that anything we know today and how we work today, it's not going to change in decade, it's going to change in years. I mean, every year right now, there's measurable, rapid innovations that are coming that are transforming certain workflows. And more of these workflows are coming together that in 2 year, 3 year, how you work today is not going to be the same 3 years from now. It's not 10, 20-year cycle anymore.
I think just to add to that, so the last 6 years I've spent working with change management, process improvement. There's going to have to both of your points, there's going to have to be a big shift in how anyone messages this to the people that are going to be using this technology. Because if they don't understand the what's in it for me, why am I doing this, it's not going to be adopted. And I can speak from the fact that if I'm a nurse and you just move that blood pressure row 5 rows down and it's not where I expect it to be, I'm going to lose my mind. So you can imagine that if all of a sudden things are going to change as rapidly as they are, we're going to have to get used to that atmosphere. So I think we're at a super exciting time, but in order for this to be successful, that diffusion of innovation is going to have to be looked at, and hospitals and health systems are going to have to ask tough questions, even when it comes to, why do we document this? Is this really needed? Well, we do it because we've always done it. Well, maybe we don't really need to ask the same question 5 times. Let's ask it 1 time and be more efficient. So if we can combine the efficiency with the innovation, I think it's going to be a big win.
We're at an inflection point. In my lifetime, there have been 2 major technology transformations that have been totally pervasive across the world, right? The first, the internet. How many of you use the internet? Second, mobility. How many of you use a mobile phone? Right? And the third is happening right now, and it's AI. And it's happening at a pace that is unlike any other technology change that's ever happened. When ChatGPT came out, it was the fastest adopted technology ever in humanity. Nothing spread across humanity as fast as that. How many of you used AI? Like those of you who aren't using, actually raise your hands if you do. Right? So still not the entire room. The other 2, the entire room, right? But it's 2 years ago, the idea that we would have AIs we would use day to day didn't exist. And already about half the room was raising their hand. This adoption curve is happening so fast. The traditional innovation curve, right, it's compressed. So the move from early adopters to laggards, it's going to be a shorter period than any other technology that we've had, which is scary and also an incredible opportunity, right? And it's going to come down to how do we implement AI into what we do every day. And it's really easy to do it bad. And if you and a lot of companies are going to do it bad. A lot of technology partners are going to do it bad, and everybody's got to watch out for that because it's going to be really quick. Hey, we've got some AI stars here. Let's sprinkle some AI on that. Won't it be awesome? That's not going to lead to the right outcomes. AI should augment and help us to do the things that we actually need to do. It should pick up the tasks that are mundane, repetitive, difficult, and make our lives more easy to focus on our missions every day. And bad AI will diminish our critical thinking because it's doing things for us that we should be doing. It will take away our agency, and it'll make us dumb, quite frankly. So there's a big fork in the road for how this stuff gets implemented. And as we're going through this curve, thinking about the human element and is this technology helping me succeed, or is it a cheat code, but it's actually going to lead to worse outcomes in the long run? That's going to be a really important thing to think about as we proceed.
That's outstanding. So I'm sitting here listening to what's coming down the pipeline, and it keeps ringing in my ear. You're asking about, what does the future look like from a change management, diffusion of innovation for our industries. There's two things firefighters hate: change and the way things are. Right? So it's not satire that there's a moniker in the industry that it's 200 years of tradition unimpeded by progress. So much of our industry is rooted in very intense imagery that ties into the identities of the people that perform the work in the fire service. So in my industry, we have struggled to innovate and change. We truly, I don't even know if we're at that 2.5% on the innovator side in our representation. We're as an industry more likely on the laggard end, at best, a late adopter. We can even find ourselves, because our imagery and our culture is so anchoring, we even tend to backslide consistently. And I'll illustrate it. You brought up the America's Burning, right? That was transformational to solve what was an out-of-control issue, and it really made a huge impact. But if you look at how the fire departments have operated, it's largely a very similar model still 50 years later. So, UL, Steve Kerber and his team started to really introduce some research for the first time to put some scientific study and measurement behind tactical fireground assumptions that we had made for decades to see if they held up true or not. And series starting in 2007 or 8 was the first published of UL's effect of ventilation on fire behavior. And they've just been pumping out research from then. And it really started to shift the culture and the mindset of the fire service. And we started to develop somewhat of a safety culture, a more risk conscientious approach. All these tactics we'd used that we thought were effective actually proved to make the situation worse. So there's a tactical shift. But now if you look at some of the hot topics in our industry right now, 2025, there is a recoil on that. And we're seeing programs like search culture, ventilation culture, where there's this movement to try to recapture some of that lost identity and practice and those gains that were made. So where does that leave us? It leaves us having to, and I think it really, I tell that story to underscore what's been said by several people here. Technology will advance quicker than our organizations and society as a whole can absorb it. And the fire service for sure. So we have to be extremely conscientious of the impact it has on our practitioners in our fields and industry. What uncertainty it creates for them. Does it disenfranchise them? Does it challenge their identity that drew them to the industry and they've continued to reinforce? Because it's also going to reveal where risk really lies. And as it gets more sophisticated in that, we're going to have to adjust rather than, we're going to go from carpet bombing to guided ordnance, I feel like, in the future. So we have to start preparing our workforces to accept that reality and that change, and then help them really manage the emotional grief cycle that will occur as the fire service does transform itself. And that's in all services. I kind of use the suppression piece to illustrate it, but we have the same cultural anchors on the EMS system side too.
Well, let's switch gears. Vision cast for us. What excites you the most? What are you working on? What is your organization endeavoring around that really is exciting and promising about the future?
I think hands-free medicine is what excites me the most. Right now, I talked about the transformation of paper into the digitized record, but that required enormous effort by every type of practitioner, whether you were in EMS or ER or hospital. Hands on keyboard has taken attention away from the clinician. And I think for the first time, I actually see a solution for that, right? The ambient AI listening technology that transforms the spoken words, now soon to come, visual AI combining together and actually creating the entire record in a manner you want, specific to the discipline that you're in, is probably the most exciting thing, that's coming. That, to me, that's just a starting point. Now that the system can listen to you, watch you, understand what you're doing, the system's ability to nudge you, to recommend, to help you elevate your practice of medicine is really the true part that excites me. But we have to get through that foundational piece of making sure that the system actually understands us appropriately, right? So that's the innovation that I would call it, earth-shattering type of innovation.
I think just to add to that, again, week 2, so I'm drinking from a fire hose. It's interesting to think about the value of that EMS data coming into the hospital side discreetly, being able to improve outcomes and really helping hospitals understand what that value is. Whether you're, besides the trauma, in addition to the trauma registry, if you're stroke certified, whatever it is, there's been a gap. Nurses spend a ton of time hunting and pecking in the chart for things. You guys would be amazed at how much time is spent. And if you miss that one data point because you didn't know it was there, you didn't know to look for it, it could be a life or death situation. So I think this is going to be amazing. I'm super excited.
I think about kind of 2 areas that I'm most excited about. So the first one, AI has been talked about a lot. This week, Motorola launched our AI for public safety. It's called Assist. We're putting a lot of investment into it. We think it's an incredibly powerful set of capabilities we're bringing. But the focus that we're putting on it, and what excites me the most about the space, is it's going to give time back. It's about time, and it's in kind of 2 categories. One is what we're doing right now, which is can you take off tasks from people's plates that they don't need to do, or can you help them do them faster and better than they could before, right? So can you pre-populate a report with some of the information based on what was seen in the body-worn camera? We launched a new camera, a new device this week called the SVX that's designed to get really high-quality audio and video and be able to help you write those reports. Not take the first draft. We don't want to take that away from the human. There's a lot of studies around causing memory corruption or memory suppression if you write too quick. But surfacing the details, like you can't, if you write in the report that the car was black, but the body-worn camera can see the car is blue, we should let you know that so you don't get in trouble later on, right? So the ability to kind of move through that work faster and simpler it's right here, it's ready. This is technology that's shipping today. What's going to happen next in AI is helping actually address some of the staffing shortages by having agentic AIs that can actually do some of the work for you. So if you think in the contact centers, in the PSAPs, one of the biggest problems is staff shortages, right? And you have an enormous amount of calls coming in that are butt dials to 911 or non-emergency calls coming into 911. Why can't you pass that over to an AI who can handle that call? And at any point, they can break out, no, actually, we need to talk to a human and get back in the right queue. But if you can pass some of that work off, now you're not jamming the 911 centers with this work that doesn't really need to be done by them. It's not their job to respond to a butt dial. They have to. They're obligated to, but that's not the job. So AI will come in and begin to do some of that work, and it's going to be a force multiplier in that way, because the people who are doing the jobs are going to have more time, and they'll be effectively AIs that are doing some of the jobs that are safe and appropriate to be done. And then the second thing I'm most excited about is drones. And drone technology is going to be absolutely transformative, and we're having a moment right now where there's a whole bunch of change in the regulation around cities and agencies being able to use drones that's happening right now. It's a radical change. So many of the cities and communities that you live in are going to be implementing drone programs. And those drones, if you look at them, they started as really expensive technology, mostly in the military space, and the costs have been coming down dramatically, and the capabilities have been coming up. So they're becoming more affordable and more capable. And you start to think about what can happen with those drones. You can begin to put payloads on them. So if you need to get an EpiPen somewhere, you'll be able to do that. If you need to fly a drone over a lake, you can drop a life preserver down to somebody who's in trouble. That life preserver could also be a drone, and it can actually be steerable to get to the person and help them. So this is happening now. So it's only going to get cheaper and more capable, and you combine that with AI and allow the AI to help get the drone to the right spot as fast as it can get there, and again, it's a force multiplier. So it's all about time. It's all about giving back time, helping you do your mission better, and it's going to be absolutely transformative as these two pieces come together.
Exciting.
Yeah, I think I'm an ecosystem guy, right? So when I look at the continuum of care, everything that happens from the 911 call all the way through patients leave, maybe there's long-term care that's involved in this as well. As I'm looking at all of the different bits and pieces, it became acutely aware to me, this being my first wave, what we touch and how our partners touch different aspects. Two other things roll up under the ecosystem. So one is taking a holistic view end-to-end of where's our impact here, and I think that's driven in two areas. And so what I'm excited about what we're doing is one in the aspect of data, right? How do we improve outcomes at the community level? Part of the ways that my teams have been looking at it is if we were to continue to go down the route that we're going, utilizing the tool sets that we have, we could wind up being and building an emergency intelligence platform that's leveraged at the local, state, and federal level, not just here within the United States, but globally. And if we're doing that, what other bits and pieces would we need to pull together? So with data being in a centralized repository, very easy to write data in, very easy to write data out, tons of work. Russell and Reinhardt, if you're in the room, my engineering and product leaders, we spent dozens and dozens of hours over the last couple of months having these conversations of what is it that we need to do, that we can contribute to this ecosystem to build this type of centralized data repository where we can seamlessly move information in and out, as can our partners. Now, if you overlay that, again, kind of using my tool analogy, my dad used to carpenter, how do we start to leverage the combination of enterprise tools that we use within our organizations, whether it winds up being some knowledge bases, customer support, chatbot, those kind of things, but then moving more importantly into, as Jeremiah was saying, agentic AI. What are some of the lower order functions that currently exist within an organization that we do that, you know what, at the end of the day, I'd be happy not doing that. I would be happy having something run in the background that stitches together this piece of data with that piece of data, make sure we've eliminated data dupe and all of these other elements. So all of these initiatives are actually in flight now. So I know a lot of you have seen up here on stage some of the innovation that we're going through from the ESO side, as well as Brad had mentioned on the, hey, how do we start to have an environment that is listening in an ambient type of mechanism so that the folks who are actually doing the work can just talk more natural, start to input information into sets of records, start to pull those again into other systems, do that entry once, and it goes through the continuum of care for patients. So super excited about what the future holds, and I think we're on the right track.
Can I just add one
Please.
comment onto that? Right. So we talked about a lot of advanced technology that's coming, but you remember initially I mentioned that you need a strong foundation to build upon, right? One of the things that I'm excited about, what you all are trying to solve at ESO, is really the continuity of care. We talk about care continuum with home and pre-hospital, and then obviously all the venues in the hospital, and then post-acute. But if you think about the two bookends are disconnected today. So we have HIE, and when a person comes to the hospital, I can look at their record, and I can look at the record all the way until they get discharged. But the two ends are disconnected. I can't get too good of a data on the post-acute side. And on the front end, more disturbingly, when I'm an ER doctor and I'm receiving a patient, I get a radio call. I don't know who the patient is coming. I know the characteristic of a patient that's coming to with chest pain and I need to do something, but we don't have identifiers that are, continuously being sent from a pre-hospital to hospital. Conversely, when you arrive at somebody's home, you don't have access to their record, right? So that basic problem of adding pre-hospital venue and then post-acute to the continuum of care, so that information is ubiquitously available throughout, has to be solved, right? And I know the work you all are doing, and I think that's the work we got to double on. So we established the connectivity, we established the record. Now, certainly, we have use of all the AI and technology to actually help us deliver better patient care. And in fact, avoid transfers, because you'll be able to make a better, richer decision in home because you have access to the entire record, right? And take them at the right venue of care that's most efficient for that problem to achieve the best outcome, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, we're on a footing in fire and EMS to have to cover the risk in the community, right? So we've been, for the history of our industry, on a response, reactive posture. And that's simply been because we've only been able to kind of dial in the where, but not really get to the root cause and the why on what really triggers the need for our services. So what I'm excited about is all of these information systems starting to link up and connect is going to enable us, assisted with these emerging technologies and AI and whatnot, to start to take a more macro level, holistic approach to identifying a better way to predict and measure risk in the community so that we can do a better job of resourcing and aligning our practice to the community demand. So much of our deployment is simply based on response time. How far away? Because we just can't get to the root cause. And I've been a part of some studies in some communities, very large, where we have dumped tremendous amounts of socioeconomic data into the analysis to try to find a predictive factor. But at the individual level, none of it's statistically relevant, right? So how do you get to answer that question so that we can get to what I kind of mentioned before, that more laser-guided ordinance? Because if we can really dial in that root cause piece, that's going to help us get more efficient and focused on our response model. But the key is once we've identified that, I feel like that's the first opportunity we'll have in our industry to actually get true on the preventative side, right? And actually try to mitigate the incident from ever even occurring. We don't want calls coming into 911, right? So the future would be a huge drop in demand in those systems because we've done such a good job of identifying the true root cause factors that are driving demand for the service.
It's a lot to think about in that discussion. We have time for maybe one more topic, and let's leave the conversation with some thought-provoking ideas around the risk. What worries you? Where's your anxiety? What's the concern? Who wants to kick us off?
The biggest concern is it's going to kill us all.
Wow. Same thing as if we, Schwarzenegger showing up naked in his front yard.
Yeah, exactly. There's non-zero chance we screw it up. But it's really kind of what I was talking about a couple questions ago. And from my perspective, getting it wrong means we outsource our thinking and the outcomes overall begin to go in the wrong direction because we are ceding control to a black box and treating it like some magic, thing that's going to make it better. We have to stay focused on, is this thing actually making my job easier to do? Is it making my mission simpler? Is it leading to a better outcome overall? And if we veer away from that and just kind of, I don't have to think about that report anymore. It was already filled out, right? Like we start to get down that world and we go to a spiral that's really bad for humanity. So keeping tied, again, if it's working right, you shouldn't really even know it's there. You should be doing the job that you need to do, and it's just helping out along the way. And if that's the world we get to, that's going to be fantastic. That's in Motorola, that's where we're trying to take this.
I think in many industries, you can afford to get 1 out of 1,000 or even 1 out of 100,000 wrong. In healthcare, you can't do that.
That's right.
It has to be near perfect. So healthcare is obviously complex, and healthcare is personal to all of us, right? So my technology friends that I work with every single day, I tell them, you have to come to work with an extraordinary amount of humility about healthcare, and if you don't, healthcare will humble you, okay? So as we move forward using technology, and particularly the AI and agentic AI, and even more specifically, I think we have to bite-size the problem and solve it in bite size, right? Chunk the problem and solve it in bite size, and constantly keep studying the impact of it, as opposed to going wholesale and saying, we're just gonna transform this, right? And now, with all of the technology in our hand, we should be able to do that in a safe manner. There are so many areas that you can get started that are almost risk-free, experiment there, and then inch toward clinical areas that could pose a risk, and that do that in a manner that is always supervised by experts, right? So I would say we all gotta go through a massive learning curve as we go through that. And it's somewhat of a concern, but I think it's also gives you more responsibility to say, hey, we gotta get this right.
Yeah, Bharat, you're absolutely right. With this change coming up and kind of my own journey coming to ESO, during my time at Google, PayPal, Amazon, if I did something wrong or our teams did something wrong, there was an algorithm somewhere that would kick in and would just kind of gloss over, right, what wound up happening, the mistake that we made, right? And coming into ESO and having conversations I've had this week, it pulls back to when I was in the military and didn't have an opportunity to serve similar to folks in this room, but went to Air Force Academy, was in the military for about 10 years and was on hazmat spill response team. Even there, it wasn't quite the lives at stake, but I'm realizing front and center, there are real lives at stake here for the mistakes that we make. And for those of us that have used different versions of AI at home, we see some of the hallucinations or other things that it does with our data, how it winds up making little mistakes and errors here and there. So part of my concern is making sure that we have guide rails and ample amounts of testing. So, right, we do exactly what you think it is. We approach it, give it the lowest tranches of data, the lowest level of activity sets, monitor it over a while before releasing it to production, making sure, hey, this works. And not just does this work, but it works 1,000 out of 1,000 times. It works 10,000 out of 10,000 times. Check, releases to production. And then so on and so forth. It's gonna be interesting. This is a ride that I think we're all on. So being a huge sci-fi nerd myself, it's exciting to see it take fruition. But I think the other big thought I have on this is, and you know this, our conversations, I look at organizations in kind of 3 lenses. So one, as we mentioned earlier, is the people aspect. So what are the changes? How do we get clear communication of what the why is, how we're gonna implement some of these changes, et cetera. That leads to the second pillar is around processes. Our organizations, whether it's fire, hospital, technology organizations, what is it that we're doing? How are we going to adapt? Do we have the right processes in place to execute against these visions? And last but not least, again, going back to the tool conversation, but the technology and tools. So the third bucket. So in looking at an organization, have we managed to up-level our folks, carve out the right kind of roles, et cetera, moving forward to work hand in hand with some of the tools that are coming? Do we have those processes in place, and making sure that we have the right tool sets and having a nimble type of setup in our environment so that as these tools, as the rapid innovation happens, we can easily swap out different bits and pieces, kind of like the Lego analogy we used earlier up here on stage a couple days ago, right? So that's how I see it.
I think tying to that, my concern has been you kind of get one shot to get it right with nursing. So if there's something AI where whether it's like, I'm just going to make a suggestion that you order this or do this protocol or whatever, and they disagree with it or whatever, there's a chance that you're going to have a lower adoption rate and it's going to spread like wildfire. So to your point of test it 10,000 times, and if it's right 10,000 times, then it's ready to go into production. The other thing that I worry about a little bit is the automation, that it doesn't make people less acutely aware of what's happening. There's so much, I think, whether you're a paramedic or a nurse or a provider, where it's just intuition, like you just walk in the room and it's like this patient's gonna crash. You just know it. And I don't want the AI to say, I don't think that's gonna happen, and all of a sudden it's like, well, the EMR didn't tell me that this is gonna happen, so I'm probably not right. They're probably just fine. So hopefully, I think we have to be cautious that people continue their clinical skills, use the technology and the AI to its benefit, but we can't get sloppy about it. We still have to be on our toes.
I think that's a beautiful way to state that, is that intuition piece. And that's, to echo your thoughts, that's what scares me more than anything from a management leadership standpoint, is complacency, if I could sum it up into a word, complacency. I think about anybody in the room here that's an EMS supervisor or manager, I don't need to know about your agency to know that's probably a constant garden you're tending on drug calcs with your clinician, right? This is simple math that we used to do off the top of our heads 40 years ago, but we've become so reliant on simple technologies that, we'll walk around the house, Alexa, what's 49 minus 4? Just because we can. And that's fine, when we're baking cookies, but what happens is when you get, in the street now, it's real-time pressure and we don't have our tools, but we're kind of hooked on the technology at this point. We want to keep going back to our tools. So we're not exercising that contemplative muscle anymore, which is the root of that intuition. And so that's what makes me nervous about, the emergence of these technologies, is how do we as leaders and managers in our organizations now continue to nurture the human element so that our people see it as an assist but not a replacement, right? And they're always prepared to question what the technical output is telling them because they've maintained their expertise in spite of it, right? And they haven't let them rot in the garden because of it.
We like to say that the AI can see everything, but it notices nothing.
Yeah.
And there's a human element that cannot be lost as we proceed. That's what we need to center down.
Well, that's the final word. Thank you to our panel for joining us. Thank you all for being here early. Hopefully we've left you with some things to chew on. We'll be back here on the main stage this afternoon for an amazing trauma keynote. Look forward to seeing you all around, and thanks again to the panel.